right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Sports Card Therapist, where I give you a behind the scenes look at my hobby hustle and sprinkling some self care and wellness on top of that. I'm Rob Gerard, your Sports Card Therapist. And whether if you're listening to me on iTunes, Spotify, or watching on YouTube, welcome to the podcast. Don't forget, the best way to reach out to me is on Instagram at Sports Card Therapist. And like I've been saying, I've been getting a bit more active on Twitter, and the Twitter card community is actually I'm really liking it. It's really I'm taking a liking to it. So if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, it's at card_therapist. So there is that. Episode 98. Here we go. Without any further ado, you already know I have on regular guy, vintage collector Nate at In Cardboard Veritas. Nate, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Rob. Thanks a lot for having me back on, man. Always excited to come on and spend a little time talking cards with you with a vintage focus. So I'm excited, man. Let's do it.
You know, I got to be honest, man. It's like I love having people like you that I can just reach out to and say, like, Nate, listen, man, it's only been 4 weeks, but I want to get you back on the pod. You know, and we were just talking about this before we came on. I feel like my mindset, I've been so these last 6 months, I've just been so enamored and in love with vintage and just everything going on with it. And we've talked forever about it, and I can continue to talk forever. But I love being able to reach out to you and say, Nate, would love to have you back on. Do you have any ideas of what you might want to talk about? And you're like, yeah, here you go. Boom, boom, boom. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, how about can we add this? And you're like, absolutely. Okay, let's go. We're doing it. And let's just jump right on, man. So it's just great being able to have someone like you to really just chat back and forth with, even throughout the week. I mean, I feel like now we're at the point where we're almost DMing daily.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And I love when you reach out because, I mean, we're both always thinking about cards, and so when you reach out, I've been thinking about some particular aspect of collecting or the hobby or whatever. And so to have a chance to come on and chat with you about it and hear what you've been up to, firsthand and connect some of those dots again is always a great time, man. So I appreciate it and was excited to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, national is we're about 3 weeks or so out from national, right? But I mean, national is still, I think, for everyone that attended, it's really the hobby new year, in my opinion. It feels like everything that happened before national, then everything that happened after national, right? And I know you were at national. Give me your what were your big takeaways from national? What was your experience? I know you got to go there with your 14-year-old son, which is amazing.
Yeah. It was incredible, man. We went in Chicago last year for the first time, and as soon as we were there, and I don't know, maybe a day or two into it, we're like, man, we're gonna have to come here every year. It's just too much fun. So my son, it's probably the thing he looks forward to most, through the year and through this past year. So there was no way that wasn't making it onto our calendar. So, yeah, man, we just had a great time. You called it New Year's. You could also call it the Hobby Super Bowl. It's like everybody's there and it's kind of like the big event. And obviously there's a lot of other great stuff throughout the year that you can do, but it's, having all those people and all those opportunities in one place over 5 days is pretty special. So, man, the conversations are always a great part of it, so we spent most of each day on the show floor and most of each night at trade nights. And, pretty much the whole time we were looking at and talking cards and hearing people's perspectives on the hobby. Obviously I have a vintage focus, so I tending to talk to fellow vintage collectors and dealers quite a bit, learning a lot through the process, seeing a lot of cards I've never seen before, talking to people I've met on Instagram over this past year and getting a chance to meet them and make those connections in person, which was really cool. And then, one of the things that really stands out to me, and it was kind of similar last year too, but you mentioned doing it with my son, and you have over a course of a few days like that, you have some experiences where people kind of show some real generosity to kids in the hobby. And we had a couple of those this time as well. and it's pretty impactful, you know, to see like kind of what people do sometimes for kids in the hobby. And, you know, they're probably people that have had special experiences throughout their lives with cards, and they want to kind of pay that forward. And, you know, of everything, those were some of the most kind of unique and memorable moments, is when people did some really cool stuff for my kid. So it was
Wow.
awesome, man.
That's amazing, man. And you know, I think your national 2022 experience was definitely different than mine. Last year when I went, you know, I went as a buyer and I walked the floor. I was there for days and it was just an amazing time. This time when I went, I was only able to go for a single day
New
because
Papa.
I'm new papa, you know,
Yeah.
so I have a 2-year-old at home. I have an 8-week-old at home.
Yeah.
I could not stay out very late, you know, so I
Yeah.
just went on Saturday. I set up as a dealer. I didn't walk the floor at all. I
Yeah.
wasn't able to really see anything. But one thing I remember last year was being blown away. And this is one of the biggest gripes I think some collectors have, but I remember being blown away with the amount of vintage that was at National last year.
Yeah.
How was it this year? Did it have that same like, wow, there's a lot of vintage in the house?
Yeah, it did. There was a ton for sure. You know, I mean, you still there. It's very mixed, but you know, you'll go through some sections where you've got 3 or 4 or 5, you know, really legit dealers with a lot of great stuff kind of clumped together, and you're like, wow, you know, like within a whatever 20 square 50 square foot area, you see like just a ridiculous amount of really awesome cards. And you know, you have to wade through some pretty tough pricing with some of it as well. You know, I mean, it's been well discussed, but there are a lot of people there who seem set up more to show their cards than to sell them. You know, they'll have them priced at 50% over comps, and if you negotiate, maybe you can get them for only 25% over. You know, sometimes people say comps is a bad word. Maybe another word for it is market value. You know, but you kind of, if you want to sell, you kind of gotta, you know, play within the market a little bit. So that part can be tough, but it's kind of fun too, because it makes it challenging to find decent deals, you know. And who wants to walk in and just kind of be able to spend all your cash in the first 10 minutes, you know? So you got to take some time. But yeah, no, tons of selection there on the vintage side for sure. And you know, you weren't able to have exactly the same experiences last year, but kudos to you, man, for making it. And from what I've heard, it sounds like you really maximized your time there and did some really neat things.
Yeah, and you know, it was great. You know, I think when I set up at some of these bigger shows, a lot of times I am used to really walking away with, you know, I mean at least 15 new cards that I bought from people, right? And they might not all be huge cards. It might be, you know, $400 to 3K, you know, and anywhere in between. It could be a $60 card stuck in there, 15 of them though. Before you know, it's like a half of a showcase has completely turned over. But this national, I felt like, you know, I definitely did not buy too much. It didn't feel like there were a lot of buying opportunities, even though everyone was walking up to my showcase asking, are you buying, are you buying, are you buying, are you
Yeah.
buying?
You
But
know, I heard that from other dealers too. I tried to talk to a lot of dealers, and you know, and I felt like a fairly consistent theme was like they were pretty much all happy with their selling, but it was very mixed on the buy side. Like a lot were saying they weren't seeing as much that they really were interested in, and the stuff they were seeing coming around tended to be lower eye appeal stuff, like not kind of the most attractive stuff. So it was very mixed in terms of buying opportunities, but pretty much everyone I talked to was having a really good show in terms of selling.
yeah, and I think part of that might be because my own eye and my taste has continued to evolve, and I'm not necessarily looking to pick up Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. Not knocking that, because don't get me wrong, 3-4 months ago I was, but I'm not looking to really, you know, buy that stuff now. So
Right.
now, you know, it's just something kind of different. And so I think when people come up to the table, I didn't see a ton that I was really interested in, and but yeah, I was able to have, you know, really good show. Walked away with a couple great cards. But before we even talk about that, tell me about your pickups, because before You came on, I believe it was June 28th, I want to say. It was probably around episode 85 or something like that. And we were talking about cards that we had on our radar. So tell me about some stuff that you picked up, your son picked up, anything along those lines.
Yeah, sure. So, the big one for me was I managed to find 52 tops Willie Mays. And right when
Woo!
I was on last time, that was what you and I talked about as being right toward the top of the list for both of us. And it was an interesting one because it was, we got there Wednesday and I saw it within probably an hour of walking in, and initially walked away from it and saw a few more over the next hour or two, and they all looked pretty bad and way overpriced. And this one kind of stuck in my head. And so, I was on the opposite side of the show floor, and it was just, it was calling my name, and I was, you start getting antsy. I was like, oh man, I hope no one else is over there looking at it and thinking about it. So I went back and somebody had it in hand when I
Get
got
out
back.
of here.
Yeah, no, and was having a long conversation with the guy about it. So I was just kind of hovering a little bit, keeping a little bit of distance. Finally, he let the thing go and put it back in the case, and I came back in, and we ended up getting a deal done. So that was one that had been toward the top of my list for probably close to a year. A card I really like a lot, and just had trouble finding the right copy of. So really excited to get that. And then I picked up a couple of really nice eye appeal later Jackie Robinsons, in a 1955 and a 1956 tops.
I love those Jackies. Okay.
Yeah,
I love those above the 54. Just and they use the same picture of Jackie in both those cards, right? The 55
yeah,
and the 56.
right. The same portrait. Yeah,
Same portrait, but I love those. I tell you, man, I think and depending on which day it is, it depends on which year I like more, 55 or 56, but those have to be some of my favorite sets of
yeah.
all time, 55 and 56. I might even go at 56 as liking 56 a hair more,
Mm,
but
yeah. Yeah. One of the ways I think about it, the 56 has a lot more going on in the
it
background.
does. There's
It's
more of an action shot.
right. It's
Yep.
kind of like a self-contained single card. I kind of like looking at the 56s a little better because
Yeah.
it's sort of like it's just kind of, it stands alone really well. But if you want to group some cards, which I like to do sometimes, I love the way the 55s look. If you pull 3 or 4 or 5 of them together, like,
They're more like portrait-esque.
yeah, and it's got that kind of, clean background, single color background where like you can put them together and they look really cool.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
love those sets, the 55 and the 56, definitely.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. So how
and
about you, man? How recent pickups? You've probably talked about some of them I know on the show already, but you've
yeah.
been doing some big things here lately.
Well, I tell you, and I think, I had mentioned this on one of the last few pods that I feel like my real true PC, which is now probably like between like 12 and 15 cards. First of all, it's really taken me out of the game in terms of dealing, because now it's like I've consolidated it and leveled up so many of my cards, and now I'm into these bigger cards that I'm just not moving. They're I'm keeping them, and I'm not looking to move them. I'm not looking to price them, and put them out. So yeah, I've probably acquired most of these cards this year. And I think that's a combination of me continuing to consolidate and continuing to level up, but also prices finally stopped climbing. And it does feel like some of these cards are a little bit more available than they were, I don't know, maybe, a year or two ago. And I think that's why a lot of these dealers that you see will have cards 50% over comps, like you're saying, because it's that old saying, like, I know what I have. And it's true, they do know what they have, right? They have grail cards. But I even though vintage isn't necessarily down, it's
Yeah.
not going up the way it was. So I
Yeah.
think like it's kind of leveled off. So I feel like it's been a really good time to pull the trigger on some of these cards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah, it seems, I think if you go back 12 months, it was still going up. But if you go back 9 months, I feel like for the last 9 months or so, my sense is it's been pretty flat. And there's some buying opportunities in there. If you find the right card at the right time through, wherever it is that you primarily buy from, whether it's IG or Facebook groups or the auction houses or eBay or My Slabs, whatever, like you strike at the right time with the right card, you can find some pretty good opportunities out there for sure. But yeah, it's also, it's been a good buying period between the national and then this summer auction season, especially I track the vintage side a lot more, but there've been, between REA, Mile High, Love of the Game, Heritage is going off next week, PWCC, Premier, there was Golden last night.
How do you keep track of all these? Do you have like a cheat code on how to keep track of all these? Because for me, there's no way I can keep track of all of these auctions. And I know I'm not in the minority. So when you have all these auctions going off, that cards are getting lost in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I have, the ones I mentioned are the ones that I tend to track. There's probably 6 or 7, maybe 8 at most. There's there's another 8 or 10 that I hear about that I don't really track, so I try to keep it, broad enough that I feel like I'm seeing a lot, but narrow enough that I don't feel like I'm spending, too many hours every day trying to track every auction that happens. So, I have found the ones that I like and that tend to have the cards that I like to go after, and, that my hobby friends tend to follow a lot and talk about as well. And those are the ones that, they'll have quarterly or monthly auctions or whatever. PWCC, I can't remember if I mentioned them, but they obviously have the weekly auction and tend to have some pretty good cards in there too. So
Yeah, definitely, man. And once again, man, shout out to you for getting me in the vintage chat, because the amount of just great conversations and great people that I have met through that vintage chat is unbelievable. And it's like I'm searching these cards out on eBay, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to find them on eBay, and then I'm going to do my best to try to find them on Instagram, right? Because taboo, I'm going to try to make a deal off of eBay, right? It's like, so, but what I realize is like half these people that are in this vintage chat are the guys whose cards I'm looking up on eBay. So it's like, wow,
yeah.
like we're sitting here just kind of conversating with some really big collectors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great group on Instagram that we have for sure. Some, really knowledgeable guys with incredible collections.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Do you think that because the guys on the crossover the other night were having a pretty good conversation, and I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are, that when with all these auctions going off and with the amount of times these cards are just available, how much of an extent is that leading to like card prices in general just kind of going down?
Yeah. Yeah, I wondered that going into, seeing all the cards that were coming up for sale on the vintage side, over this kind of 4 or 5, 6 week period. Was there really going to be, a potential kind of downward cycle in pricing with all this availability? Like I think it was REA had just a tremendous number of Gaudy Babe Ruths available, for example, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them or something like that. But, my observation so far has been that hasn't really been the case. I think, just in the cards that I track, and obviously I don't see everything or anywhere close to it, but, REA and Mile High seem pretty strong. They each ended a week or two ago. The ones that ended last night, Golden and Love of the Game, at least in the cards I was looking at, maybe were a little bit softer in pricing. So I don't know. It's auction to auction, card to card. I won one card at Golden last night, actually, though. And I'll tell you that card was not in the soft pricing category. I overpaid for I kind of got a little emotional about it and really wanted it. But it was a 1933 Gaudy Jimmy Fox.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is a card I've been after for a long time. Just haven't been able to find a copy that I really love. And there was one on there last night. It was a PSA 4. and ended up paying kind of way over market for it, because it's just the registration is really tough on that card. The centering is really tough. The color can be faded, and this kind of had everything, checked all the boxes for me. And I'd had a glass or two of wine, and I figured, man, I'm just going to get this card.
And you know what? You know, the Jimmy Fox, even though that's, you know, definitely one of the premier cards of that set, I would still think that that card probably does not become as available as like the Ruths, because everyone knows how high of a price tag the Gaudy Babe Ruths demand. And once it leaves the hand of like a really solid collector and it gets into the hands of people just kind of trying to move them and make money and stuff like that, a lot of times you'll see like the same exact card selling multiple times, multiple times, multiple times until finally it disappears. And that's because it got in the hands of a collector. So I
Yeah.
would imagine you probably see the Ruths sell a lot more than the Foxes.
It's a good observation. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah, you get some Ruths that end up in the hands of investors and people that are kind of looking to make a little quicker sales, maybe than something like a Jimmy Fox that's probably going to tend to reside in long-term collections, you know, a lot more frequently. So yeah, and the population on the Fox is fairly small too. It's lower than the Ruth populations. I think there's two Foxes in the set. I think they're each around 600 or 700, and the Ruths tend to be around 11 or 1200 or so. Which that's natural. Obviously, it's a much more valuable card, so people saved it. People got it graded.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And the second you pulled it from the pack, you know, or you know, the second you pulled it, people realize like, oh my God, Babe Ruth, okay. Like, you know, even the kids realize that and they're like,
yeah,
oh well, let me put this in something really quick, you know.
right.
So
And mom was probably like, throw out the rest of them, but keep the Babe Ruth.
exactly, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, and you know, it's so thinking back, man, I know how much getting that maze meant to you at National, getting that Willie Mays. And I don't know if you messaged me or if I messaged you or how it started, but I'm pretty sure the night you bought it, I think you sent me, you know, you sent me a picture of it, and I think it was leaned up against like a glass of scotch or something like that. And I think you said something like, yeah, my son went to trade night. I'm just sitting here with Willie, and we're just hanging out for the night in the hotel room.
Good
And you know
memory,
what?
man. I think that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah,
And I
man.
tell you what,
That's a great feeling, isn't it? When you've been after a card and you get the one you love, and it's in your hand, and it's yeah. There's not much beats it.
I tell you, man, and you know, having that DM exchange with you, you know, the direct message, um, part of me felt like I got the Willie Mays. You know what I mean? Because I was so happy for you. You know,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
That's one of the great things too, really, is you know, building your community of like-minded collectors is such a fun part of being in the hobby, you know, and having whatever it is, 5, 10, 15 guys that you interact with a lot, that you share your collecting journey with. And then when they get a card, you're as excited for them as they are, you know. I mean, and so having that, you know, kind of shared experience of acquiring cards is really, yeah, one of the awesome things about doing what we do.
Yeah, man, definitely. So before we pivot into the topic, which is going to be talking about these undervalued, not really talked about, kind of like, you know, diamond in their rough vintage cards that people can look out for. Before we talk about that, I just wanted to give you, you know, a little bit of recognition for your involvement with Adam, who's with PWCC. I think, what's his Instagram handle again?
It's the real 2-7 guy.
The real 2-7 guy. So yeah, tell me about this list that you've been kind of working on and kind of jumped on board with him about that
Sure.
PWC's doing.
Yeah, right. They're doing an iconic 100 cards list. It's not just sports cards, but kind of all cards. And I think they polled, I believe it was about 150 collectors to get their feedback on which cards they believe to be most iconic. And then Adam asked me to be among the group of people that's kind of presenting some of the cards as they count them down. They're putting out one new card each day in the countdown from 100 down to the most iconic card. So it's a really neat project. I like that they're making a lot of content. I think Adam is making some really good content over there. Obviously, there are always going to be some naysayers when you put something like that out, and some people that say,
Have
well,
there been naysayers?
yeah, no, I think so. I mean, and naturally there would be. I mean, it's one group's list, it's one methodology's list, and if you take any other group or any other methodology, you're going to get a different list. But I do think that they tried to pull a diverse group of people. I think they tried to pull a lot of people, and I think they tried to, were really thoughtful about it and are trying to do a good job. And I think it's creating a lot of good discussion in the hobby. So it's a pretty cool project.
Yeah, man. And shout out to Adam for sure. I didn't know how many people were polled on it, but I know he had, reached out to me and was like, "Hey, how would you feel about doing these and ranking these cards?" So I had finished that, and I didn't know when I was like, "Yeah, definitely, man, send it." I didn't know what I was getting into, because when you had to rank literally 100 cards
Yeah.
in order, I was like, "Oh my God." I think it took me over an hour.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm thinking, and I'm realizing like some of these iconic cards, and just thinking about it. And I'm like, wow, well, where does the Wilt Chamberlain rookie rank against the Derek Jeter? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, wow. And you start to really just take a look at these and just realize the history. And that's the beautiful thing about cards, right? Is they are like history books on a single piece of cardboard. Because if a picture's worth 1,000 words, you have these iconic pictures that can really just kind of capture not only that player's face or that moment that the picture was taken in, but it captures their career. It captures the sport at that time. And we've talked about Jackie Robinson and Bill Russell before when you've come on, and just everything that kind of goes in to all that. So
Yeah.
it's incredible when you think about these cards.
Yeah, well said, man. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the project is doing a good job of shining a spotlight on a lot of the important cards. And it's pretty cool with the snippets, video snippets on each that they're doing to kind of talk about it. And you have someone on who generally likes to collect that kind of card, and has some knowledge and history about it. So yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes people argue over this kind of stuff because we just like to debate. We love to talk about sports, and anytime lists like this come up, it gives us a chance to kind of rehash or even just reinvent different debates that haven't been out there before. I mean, who loves a debate more than a sports fan?
Absolutely. Yep. No, that's true. That's true.
So, I would hope that it's all done in good fun, and that, me, PWCC isn't taking the brunt of too much negativity. Let me put it that way, because I think just the undertaking of the project that they're doing in general is just unbelievable, and it's great for the hobby. So, and this
Yeah,
is going
for
to be
sure.
something that we look back on, years from now, like, oh, PWCC did that ranking, and it's almost like the top 75 NBA list.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. No, and I think the vast majority of the feedback I've seen has been positive, certainly, and a lot of really good discussion. And, mini debate: should this card be above this card? And I think that's part of the point of the exercise. I think is to have those kind of debates. Like you say, it's something that we all love doing. So it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, jumping into today's topic, 30 minutes into the episode, we're finally going to get around to the topic. So, what we were discussing this, right, all throughout the week, and really talking about cards, vintage cards that not so much like, we want to give people an idea of, these are the vintage cards you should be buying. No, that's not at all what this is. This is not at all what this is. But I think that vintage does kind of feel like it's been like, it's been, I don't know, hot lately, and vintage kind of feels like it's been It's been the, genre of collecting that feels the most stable, I would say. So I think people are kind of curious, right? And might want to dip their toe in, and or maybe not, but let me ask you, what was your thinking behind some of these cards that you picked today?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say part of it is, you on social media, you see a lot of the kind of splashy, high value cards a lot and stuff that, people tend to focus on. And I think part of the exercise here was to, kind of like really collector oriented. Like, what are some cards that collectors enjoy for the card itself? And also an element of accessibility. I think in trying to pull together these few cards that we're going to talk about, I wanted it to be cards that would be that you could get for $250 or so or less. Not, obviously we can all pick the whatever 5-figure cards that everyone's chasing and wants and gets a lot of the the hobby headlines and IG posts and all that. But just to focus on some like real hardcore collector cards that for whatever reason are cool, that if you whip one of these out and show it to a vintage collector, he's going to be like, wow, that's a really cool card. And it didn't cost you even 4 figures, like it's really achievable. Maybe you're starting vintage collecting. Maybe you're like, hey, I see all this stuff that's out there all the time, but what are some cards kind of beyond that have either a cool history or represent a neat part about the game, or that come from a really aesthetically pleasing set that are accessible to me, that collectors really enjoy. I'd say that was kind of part of how I thought about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to jump into this, man. So, what do you got for card number 1 and player number 1?
All right, yeah. So I'll show them here a little bit too. I have most of them here. I don't have all of them, but this is the 1952 Topps Monty Urban. So yeah, comes from obviously one of the best known sets. We're all gonna have our popcorn and be watching that heritage auction here next weekend with the Mantle 9.5 going off and seeing what that goes for. It comes from the 52 Topps set. You have the great Jackie Robinson and Willie Mays cards from that set, of course. Landmark set that pushed the hobby forward. But if you go a little deeper, there are some other really cool cards in there too. And this Monty Urban is one that stands out to me and stands out to a lot of collectors. It's just a really vivid portrait of him, beautiful card. And it kind of, I think feels to a lot of collectors almost a little ahead of its time. It's, it looks like Monty could kind of jump off the card and go play for the Mets tomorrow. He's got he's playing for the New York Giants, but he has the logo on his cap that kind of looks like the current Mets logo, with the blue and orange. Just vivid, beautiful portrait, great background, and just such a well conceived, well balanced card. I know a lot of vintage collectors that are really proud to have this one in their collection, and you can get a great looking copy of it for probably $100 to $150.
Wow. Wow. And yeah, a little bit about Monty Urban. So he played, like you had mentioned, for the Giants, and when Willie Mays came aboard, he was actually one of Willie Mays's mentors on the team. And he was
Yeah.
asked to kind of look after Willie and almost like mentor him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think he was probably 10 or so years older than Willie. Irvin had played in the Negro leagues for many years before he came into the major leagues, and he was one of the best players there. I think if you kind of look historically, generally regarded as one of the 5 or 10 best players. With guys like Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige and so some of the others that played in the MLB. So he came in a little later. He had fought in World War II. He actually sustained some injuries there, including he had like some pretty severe ringing in his ears after that kind of limited his play a little bit. But he still was tremendous when he came into the league, got MVP votes. He was a many-time All-Star, won a World Series there with the Giants. And yeah, he was one of Willie's key mentors. I saw a cool line from him. He said, yeah, the first 2 years I showed Willie around the league and around town, and by year 3 he was showing me around. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely great pick. Definitely great pick.
Nice.
So okay, what do you got for card number 2?
All right, the next one here. This is 1951 Bowman Roy Campanella.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Listen, before we even go into that,
yeah.
I have been set collecting the 51 Bowman
Oh,
and talk about a lot of cards, first of all. Talk about a lot of
how
cards.
many are there in the set?
I want to say 440.
Yeah, it's a big set. Yeah.
It's a big set. So right now, in my binder, I have about 85 of them, and I just made a big purchase a few days ago. I don't even have them in hand yet for like another 80 of them.
Oh, is that
So
right? Nice.
yeah, so I'm slowly and I have feelers out everywhere. Before you know it, I'm going to be one of those guys like going to shows with my binder and like a folding chair with like my glasses and just kind of sitting down at the old vintage and just digging through boxes with my 3-ring binder and crossing out what I need. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
I love it, man. I love that you're digging in on the set collecting side. That's really cool. Cool.
yeah, no, definitely good stuff, man. But okay, so 51
Yeah,
Bowman, Roy Campanella.
yeah.
Whew,
Awesome set. That's
campy, campy.
campy. Yep.
Okay, yep. So
So the set, yeah, obviously well known for the Mantle and Mays rookie cards. Those are the real headliners in the set. But beautiful set overall. The early Bowman sets were tremendous. And this campy card, I put this in. I've got one buddy on Instagram, 1956 Tops guy. I think you probably know him as
yep.
well. He really loves
No,
collecting.
it's 56, right?
56, yeah,
Yeah,
56.
56.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
He loves collecting catcher cards. He has a huge affinity for this card as well. And I put this out there almost to kind of represent that genre of catcher cards where you see the catcher in action, you see the catcher gear of the time. You've got some awesome Campanella cards, Yogi Berra, Johnny Bench, Thurman Munson. If you look at some of the cards from each of those guys, you'll see some really cool in-action shots of catchers doing catcher things, chasing foul balls, which is what it looks like Campy is doing here, flipping off the mask, with the chest protector and the knee pads on.
I
And
don't
just
think
beautiful artwork.
Did Yogi have any action shots like that though? Now that I'm thinking, I'm
Hmm.
going through my mental Rolodex right now, and between the 48, the 49, I can't remember any action shots he had.
Man, it's a good call. No, I think you're right. It's his
Which
are
is
lacking.
bizarre because he's arguably, I mean, he's the top 3 greatest catcher of all time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and in that time, late 40s, early 50s, it was Yogi and Campy, and they were Campy was winning. He won 3 MVPs. I want to say it was 51, 53, and 55. He won the MVP award in the National League, and Yogi was doing the same thing in the American League, and they were meeting in the World Series. I think they met in the World Series like 5 times, and Yogi and the Yanks almost always got the better of the Dodgers back then. But it was a heck of a battle. And Campanella was, he was another one where he lost many years in the majors to, he was playing in the Negro Leagues and before integration. Yeah. He lost some years at the end as well. He had the car accident and, was paralyzed. It was later in his career at the time. But, clearly one of the best catchers ever. One of the things he's really known for is his rifle arm. We've seen that with some other guys, Pudge Rodriguez and stuff like that. But Campy still has the best throwout rate of all time. It's up like 57, 58% or something. Wow. Like he just had an absolute cannon.
Wow. Yeah. And Campanella, I mean, what a, like you said, played for the Dodgers and just unbelievable. Good hitter as well, and just unbelievable. So, and I love the set too. I love how you're not only picking incredible players that really aren't on the forefront of everyone's mind when you think of vintage players, but you just picked 52 Tops and you picked 51 Bowman, arguably 2 of the top 3 greatest baseball sets of all time. I mean, maybe excluding 33 Gaudy or maybe excluding T206, but
right.
Which, by the way, I meant to ask you, are you still collecting the Cracker Jack cards?
I I have a couple of them. Yeah, it's might be a little bit of a stretch to say I'm collecting them because I don't have that many, but I have a couple, and the couple that I have are among my favorite cards. I
Yeah.
absolutely love them. Yeah.
Well, I remember, I think it was one of the first few times you appeared on Sports Card Therapist, and you were talking about, how you were just starting to, I think, get into them, and they were just kind of piquing your interest a little bit. And we were having that conversation. And last week, I was just doing what I do, just scrolling through vintage Facebook groups and vintage threads on Twitter, and I saw a Cracker Jack card, and the first thing I thought of was you. I was
Nice.
like, oh, so
Yeah.
so I knew I wanted to ask you about that, but it's so hard, man, because I can remember I had gotten a few T206 cards, and I'm like, I think I want to start set collecting T206 cards. Like, am I,
Yeah.
and then it was like, whoa, okay, that's
Yeah,
pretty
that's a big
expensive. Like,
undertaking right there.
even for guys, whether if it's Gaudy or T206, even for guys that maybe weren't even in the majors, you're still gonna be paying $50 per card. Now you start talking about Hall of Famers, now you're talking in the thousands.
Right.
So it's
Yeah,
like very expensive to try to start collecting those kind of things. And same thing with Cracker Jack
for
cards,
sure.
because it's just
Yeah, and then the T206s, at least there are a lot of them. The populations are a little higher, but with the Cracker Jacks, like they're obviously super beautiful cards, and so and they've got some tremendous Hall of Famers, and then they're really rare. I mean, most
well, a
of them.
lot of them probably got thrown out with the box.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, yep. And you have the two sets, obviously 1914 and 1915, and there are more of the 15s. I think generally kind of 2 to 3 times the population of the 14s, but that's generally maybe 150 total PSA pop as opposed to 50 or 60. So
Wow.
there's not a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so Roy
Next one, yeah,
Campanella, 51 Bowman. All right, what do you got
yeah.
next?
All right, so next one here, you've probably heard of this guy once or twice. In fact, I know he's one of the guys that you collect. So
Yes, absolutely. And you know
one of your
what?
pyramid guys.
Yes, and that was actually at my request. I asked him, listen, can you throw a mantle card in there? So
Yeah.
I appreciate you very much.
For sure. Yeah. So this is the 1958 Topps All-Star card. And it's a card that, a 50s mantle usually is a really expensive card to go buy, but this is one of the exceptions to that. I think this was the first All-Star set that Topps made in 1958, like 20 or 21 All-Stars included. And one of the neat things about this, well, a couple things. It's a great looking card, with the red and white with the stars in the background. Mick, full swinging pose, prime Mickey Mantle. Just a great composition on the card. And then it's really affordable. And I feel like I've talked to a lot of people, and I'm one of them. This is one of the first Mickey Mantle cards that a lot of people get. I collected a little bit of vintage stuff as a kid, and this card that I just showed is one that I've had since I was probably 14 or 15 years old. And if you ask me like, hey, what was your first? I don't remember exactly which one, but this is the one that comes to mind for me as kind of my first mantle. And there's a lot of guys that have had that same experience, because it's accessible. It's a great looking card. It's an early mantle. You've got the story too with Bob Costas about this one, right? This is the card that he famously has carried around in his wallet like most of his adult life.
Yes.
Yeah, the card that he really identifies with as a huge baseball guy and Mantle guy. And so it's one of those cards where it's like, I think you can get a PSA 5 of that for $250. I mean, it's and you could get a 3 for probably 150, 170, something like that. A good, decent looking copy of it that's very accessible and affordable, and just a great looking card with a lot of history.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing we can say about Mickey Mantle that hasn't already been said. Greatest switch hitter of all time. 3-time MVP award winner. Just unbelievable. Won the Triple Crown in 56. It's just, batting 353 with 52 homers. Like, the guy's just was unbelievable. So
Force of nature.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on.
Yeah. So last one. Yeah, one more. So The last one, I actually don't have one here. I've got one, but it's in the vault. So wasn't able to get that one here. But so it's the 1953 Bowman Color Pee Wee Reese. You know that one? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a card that that shows Pee Wee turning a double play, presumably with his double play partner Jackie Robinson. It shows him leaping high in the air over a guy who's sliding in to try to break up the double play, and it's just an incredible composition of all sports cards. If you just ask me, you know, which one, if you blew it up, looks like it should be on a museum wall. You know, it's that card. It's just incredible. And then the 53 Bowman color set was kind of Bowman's answer in some ways to the 52 top set, with, you know, bigger set, really striking design. They did these, you know, like really vivid photography on the set, and kind of stark without a lot, you know, not much else. So really kind of put that photograph kind of front and center. And the interesting thing with the Pee Wee card is it looks more like a painting, because, you know, the photo is a little bit out of focus. And so it's almost kind of got a little bit of an impressionist quality to it. But with him, you know, sort of flying through the air, he's got his arm cocked back, about to make the throw to first base to try to turn two. Beautiful blue background. And yeah, it's just, you know, one of the more artistic cards, and, you know, any vintage collector knows that card and either has it or wants it, and, you know, and loves it. And again, it's a card you can get in a lower grade copy for, you know, $250 or so.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it when you said that picture and that image. If you can, if you're listening, guys, or you're watching, please pull up a 1953 Bowman Pee Wee Reese, because absolutely it belongs on the wall of a museum somewhere. Like you said, it's actually a lot. The card, it's 60% dirt, right? And then like 40% sky, and then there's just these tiny players kind of in the middle, out of focus, like you said. But it's an incredible shot. And and you know what I like about the 53 Bowman is it feels just like this oversized card, extremely thin borders. And you know, to your point, you know, trying to have an answer for that iconic 52 top set. And which is probably the most iconic set of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, totally agree, man. So that's all I got. I have one bonus card for you, though, and it's one I know you're familiar with and have been doing some things with recently. I wanted to throw one in on the basketball side, and it's not easy to find a copy in the 250 range, but they do sell once in a while, if you can find a decent one in a low grade. And it's a card that is just, you know, I think a tremendous looking card, and, you know, again with beautiful image on it. So this is one that I feel like deserves.
I knew you were going to pull that out.
Did you? So it's the 1961 Fleer in action Bill Russell that has the subtitle of it is Takes to the Air, and Russell is kind of fully extended, gliding through the air with his famous left hand finish, and just an unbelievable looking card. One of Russell's 3 main issue cards, and one that I feel like, you know, for the price that it's available, if you're a basketball collector, you should have one of those, and I know you do.
Yeah, and I definitely gives me a great opportunity to show mine real quick.
Yeah.
And you know, so let me just say, so yep, here's mine with the in-person auto, PSA DNA certified. I mean,
Beautiful.
the card's in great condition, even though it's just graded authentic. The card's in great condition. The auto is pretty decent. And so
yeah, that looks really nice, man. I like that he has the number 6 on it too, now retired across the league.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So let me just say this. I have so much respect for you, Nate. I have so much respect for you, and just your mind of vintage, that I feel like there have been quite a few cards, quite a few purchases that I've made, and some I haven't made, that I have run by you. And you know, I've said, Nate, listen, I'm thinking about making a play on this card. What are your thoughts? And and I've told you, like, listen, man, please, if I come to you like that, please don't even sugarcoat it. Like truly give it to me straight, because um I could remember getting back in the hobby, right? Like years ago, and there were, maybe cards I was buying or plays I was making, and I wish someone would be like, you know what? At least giving me something to think about. Like just like the whole auto thing, right? Like sticker auto versus on-card auto. Obviously on-card auto is more sought after. Sticker auto is like, okay, you'll take one if you can get it kind of thing. I could remember when I almost overpaid for there were two cards I almost overpaid for a few years back, and thankfully my buddy was like, well, listen, I don't want to, piss in your Cheerios here, but here's something to think about. And so I can remember almost pulling the trigger on a Jordan Fleer rookie PSA 8, but it had the qualifier of OC.
Mm,
And I didn't really understand fully what that meant and how it devalued a card. Oftentimes, really what people say is, you could really take two grades off of that. So if it's a PSA 8 with a qualifier, like on a Jordan rookie, you kind of got to give it PSA 6 comps. And I was about to pay this guy PSA 8 value for it.
yeah.
And thankfully my buddy was like, listen, here's just something to think about. And then I could also remember almost overpaying for what I thought was a Patrick Mahomes RPA, but it was a, what they call like a napkin patch, like a napkin cloth. So it was really like a
Mhm.
jersey relic, and it wasn't an actual patch, but that's kind of what the guy listed it at. I was really excited when I saw the card. He's like, listen, just to kind of give you a heads up, like technically that's not really an RPA. So if you were to buy that and tell people it was an RPA, you'd look foolish because it's not an actual patch, it's a napkin patch.
Yeah.
So luckily I had kind of guys like that like threw those things out there to me. So, you
Yeah.
know, and so having someone like you in that vintage realm that I can just say, like, you know what, dude, this is what I'm like. I can remember this Bill Russell saying, what do you think about this card? What are your thoughts on this? And what I like doing is being like, off the top of your head, not that I'm trying to stump at you or anything, but like, what would you value this at? I'm not even going to tell you yet what he's asking for it. I want to know, based on your, I'm not going to say you're an expert, right? But based on your knowledge and expertise, what would you ballpark value this at? Because I like knowing what the guys that are, that really know their stuff think.
Right.
So that's why I have so
Yeah.
much respect for you, Nate, and why I probably blow up your DMs a little bit more than you would like sometimes when it comes to cards.
Nah, I love it, man. I love talking cards with you all the time, man. And I appreciate you saying that. And that's one of the awesome things about this hobby. I mean, I keep saying that about different things, but the community is cool, man. If people have the quality of self-awareness to know when they could use a second opinion or a third opinion, and are willing to ask the question, and have a couple buddies in the hobby, you're going to get great answers and great input for sure. People, collectors love to share their ideas and their knowledge, and having a group of people like that is absolutely critical. And when you've been doing it a long time, it's the same thing. Like, there's a lot of factors to consider, especially when you're going to make a big purchase, for a showpiece part of your collection or whatever. It's really cool to have a couple guys you can go bounce the idea off and say, hey, I love this example for this reason, but this one, how I collect, you think this flaw is going to bother me in the long run? Or what do you think about this? It's a pretty rare one. I haven't seen one come up in a while. Should I really go hard at this one? Or like, just kind of getting that perspective from different people is super valuable. So no, man, I love our conversations both ways, and now it's great. So.
Yeah, and I can remember when I messaged you about this, Bill Russell in action with the auto, and it was something that I would probably ask someone, but for some reason it didn't even cross my mind. And you said, you're like, yeah, I love that card. That's a great card. You're like, what's the pop on that? And it didn't even cross my mind to check the pop on it. So
Yeah.
So then I went and looked, and only 18 of these have ever been, slabbed and certified PSA DNA. And so that, I think, was probably the main thing right there. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, okay, only 18 of these things have ever been graded by PSA. If it was something where I looked and there was like 600 of them, that would have
Right.
totally put a different spin on things, right? Would have been like, whoa, 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 okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
this isn't as rare as I want to believe it is.
They're right. I mean, there's 3 playing days cards of Bill Russell, and if you look at his total PSA DNA pop on those 3 cards, it's probably 100 or less. I mean, it's in the 100 range of his 3 main cards being signed. I mean, there's just not a lot of them, and so it's a really really cool thing to have in your collection that's not going to come up much. I saw that one of his maybe his best signed rookie card was in Golden last night. It was
Would it go for 64?
no, it went a lot bigger. I think it went around 160. It ended up,
Oh, that's what it was.
yeah,
Okay.
it went, yeah, I think it was a PSA 6.5 DNA 10, really nice auto. And yeah, so that, the vintage sign stuff has really been going nuts lately. And, with good reason. And it was, a lot of people didn't like to collect that stuff for a while. I think there's still a segment of the hobby that feels like cards should be collected in the way that they came out of the pack, but it's clearly becoming, more and more popular as a way to collect vintage stuff. And, and the populations are so small that even, a fairly small number of people moving energetically into collecting those kind of cards is going to really impact the price. Cause I mean, look at that Russell card you have. I mean, that's just such a cool card. And there's like 18 of them, I mean, that's cool. So
Yeah, man, definitely. And listen, I appreciate you. I feel like we can go on for another hour, for
it's,
another hour, but Nate, I appreciate you, man. And I'm really hoping that, this is episode 98 right here, and coming up on my 100th episode. It's just an unbelievable concept to even think that, I'm coming up on 100 episodes of this. And so, to have you on this podcast as much as I have had, and I can't even, I'd be guessing if I guessed. I want to say this is your 5th or 6th appearance, but hopefully we can continue this through season 3. And just because I love our conversations, it's just always food for thought for me. And I know that the feedback I get from listeners when it comes to our conversations, even if they don't collect vintage, even if they're not collecting vintage, and I think that's something that we can do, and I think that you and I do well together. It's like, I feel like we can get into the weeds with vintage, but we do it in a very consumable way.
yeah, yeah, no, good, man. It's really fun coming on for sure. And that's cool that you're up to episode 98. And, I'm sure your viewership and listenership continues to grow. You bring a really great perspective to the hobby. And, it's yours is the podcast I probably listen to most often of anyone, because you always give me something to think about whenever I listen. So I love coming on anytime, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Nate. If people want to reach out to you and pick your brain, say hello, any and all the above, how can they reach you?
IG is probably the best way, at In Cardboard Veritas.
Beautiful. Well, Nate, thank you very much for coming on once again, man. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Great to see you.